Let's do that hockey.
Welcome to the Dobber Prospects Radio Podcast, episode 105. I'm your host again, Peter Harling, and today I'm going to be joined by Boston Bruins expert from the Black and Gold podcast, the one, the only, Mark Allred. Mark, thanks for joining the show.
Peter, it's been a pleasure for the invite and a pleasure to come back and talk some prospects with you.
I can't talk Boston Bruins prospects with anybody that doesn't have a New England accent. It just doesn't seem genuine. All right. So thanks again for coming on. Mark was on last year. So this year we're talking my top 10 prospect rankings. I wrote this article for my NHL trade rumors. I've tweeted out a couple times. I'll put the link in the show notes. Mark's going to go over the top 10 with me and tell me where I messed up. Guys that are too high, too low, that shouldn't be on the list, that are missing, that should be on it, that aren't, so on and so forth. So I've been starting at the top and working my way down. First of all, I usually start the conversation off, Mark, with just a little bit of sort of a synopsis on where the team's at. So the Boston Bruins have had a pretty good track record the last couple of years. You know, I would say that the Don Sweeney era has been pretty favorable to Boston. They've made the playoffs a bunch. They did trade a couple first round draft picks, but despite that, I think they still have a pretty decent prospect pool. It's not great. But you know, the top 10 has got some guys in it that I really like. And there was even a couple players outside of that I gave serious consideration to ranking. So, you know, they could have a top 12 to 13, 14, in my opinion, of you know, fantasy or NHL relevant prospects. I don't think they have too many blue chip prospects though. So, you know, they did address that at this year's draft. So let's just start with, how have you seen their drafting and developing over the last decade? Do you like the players, the draft strategy that they had? And this follow-up to that question would be, how do you feel about their development of their prospects? Because, you know, the Ducks have done it well. Arizona, Buffalo, not so much. Where do you see Boston in the realm here?
You know, Don Sweeney's got a really bad reputation for not drafting very well, especially in 2015. I honestly hate bringing that up all the time because he whiffed on 3 absolute gems. But over the years, you know, when you had to get rid of a first round pick to get rid of a David Backes contract, and you needed that $6 million cap or AAV off your books, there was a lot of things that had to be involved in movements like that. So it did really take a big dent in drafting and developing in a proper sense. But lately, it's gotten a lot better. I noticed that there's a trend in Boston that defense is always one of the first things that we pick in the first 3 rounds. There's always somebody on the back end that needs to be brought through the system and so on. But I like the way that they've been doing it lately with the forwards and so on, getting more guys involved and addressing needs. And I think with Fabian Lysell being the first round pick in 2021, I think that addressed a huge hole in the right wing side that we've been really trying to trade for, and we weren't able to develop. But I think this kid's going to come in and surprise some people. Obviously, wherever he goes, whether it's an AHL season or over in the Dub with the Vancouver Giants. But I do like the way that they've been developing down in Providence. I think with Jay Leach being gone to the Seattle Kraken, they left a really big hole in how this team is taught the systems and so on. But Ryan Mujanel, he comes into the as an assistant coach, gets promoted as the head coach, and Matt Thomas, who was with the Cincinnati Cyclones for the past 2 seasons, and he has a really good record in the East Coast Hockey League. So as a head coach, so I think it's going to be good. I think the systems are still going to be in place of where Jay Leach left them before departing for Seattle, and just by the way the team's been playing, especially down in Providence at the AHL level, if there was no pandemic times, I really think that out of the 2 or 3 years, this team could have gone to a Calder Cup. They really had the team structure, the team motive of let's get things done, let's work hard, let's show our parent club that if you need to break glass in case of an emergency, we have ready facilitating members for you to rise up to cover a roster spot if needed with injuries and so on. So I'm kind of like down on the drafting and so on. I think that things can get better, but I do like the way that how they work with the construction of what they have, and how they look for players, whether it be the East Coast guys that coming up and, the Ian McKinnons and blah, 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 just to fit pieces in here and there. But this is the way these teams have been going. I mean, I think in October, we're going to be raising 2 straight Atlantic Division banners. So it tells you something really good. But, without the playoffs, it really doesn't show that championship caliber at the American level.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way that they are not afraid to slow cook their prospects in the American Hockey League, and I think they've done a really good job with that. It hasn't always paid dividends, though. I'm just scanning the roster right now, and I'm looking for some players that they've drafted and developed, and you see Pasternak and Charlie McAvoy as players who are in or entering their prime at the top of the list. You got some graybeards as well on the roster. And outside of that, it's, there's a lot of externally recruited players that are impact or in the top half of their roster. So it's hard to argue when you have Charlie McAvoy and David Pasternak. That's a pretty good start right there. And even if that's all you have, that's better than a lot of teams. So they've got, I would say, quality, if not quantity, of impactful drafted and developed players on their roster, and we'll see what's coming out, because I think they're an aging team now a little bit, and they're gonna have to start looking at some roster turnover. So this top 10 list is guys that are gonna have to be payoffs. They're gonna have to hit on some of these guys that are coming up. Fabian Lysell, I have him ranked number 1. You just touched on him a minute ago in your little speech there. He instantly becomes the top ranked prospect. And for me, that's because I think his skill level is extremely high. And based on that puts him at number 1. They've been kind of tending to draft players with size. John Beecher, Trent Frederick, Urho Vaakanainen, like a lot of their earlier round picks in the last few years have been, big old bad Bruins roster size. And here they went with a little guy that doesn't have any physicality, but has oodles and oodles of skill. How do you like that strategy? You think that this is something that organizationally they really needed to do?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on David Pasternak, and basically, in my research, he was actually the last right wing that successfully got drafted by the Boston Bruins and came up through the system, whether be in Providence or over in the Czech Republic and so on. But that's been a hole, and they tried to address that with vaccination in 2015, and that was just a complete failure. But then, it's just those plug and plays that came up, and, they made trades for Craig Smith and so on that are still working out. But in my opinion, still want to have those players that you selected in the, you took away from the draft podium, and you want to build their confidence through the system and so on. But this is definitely an address that they needed with Fabian. And I think that PJ Axelson was just a mastermind behind this, telling the Bruins management that we need to get this guy if he's available. And I honestly want to say that he was probably the steal of the draft, because he was ranked as one of the best skaters in this draft. So, and this was probably because of the pandemic times, and nobody's traveling and so on, and we can't see, it's a lot of video scouting and so on. So, maybe the 2021 draft was kind of hit or miss with a lot of players, but I think that this kid's going to be something special. But I also want to do it right. I also, he does have the availability to go to the Vancouver Giants and the WHL because they have his rights as a CHL import. And they drafted him in the 30th of the first round in 2020. So there's an option. I'd like to see him in the dub because, like you said, Peter, he's a little undersized and so on. I think that league, and that league is going to come at you really tough and hard. And I think that might be an experience that he might want to get. Yeah, it might benefit the player and the organization, but there's also a chance he makes it to the AHL, and his progression will be that much higher and faster if he goes that route.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways I can see his development panning out. His skill level alone, he's a top, I don't know, 5, maybe even pick in this year's entry draft, and the Bruins pick him up at 21st. I kind of felt the same way about when they drafted Pastrnak. They got him late in the first round, and I was like, am I the only guy that's seen this kid play? Like, why is he so low? So with Lysell, there's a couple of warts to his game that pushed him down the draft chart a little bit on draft day. He's 5'10", so he's a little undersized. He's not very physical. If he doesn't have the puck on his stick, I think there's some question about what this player brings to your organization. I've also, read a little bit about him and how he's a very one-dimensional player. He doesn't use his teammates very well. He plays for his own stat line and not the team, and so on and so forth. And, you can draw comparisons to Josh Ho-Sang there. That sounds a lot like Josh Ho-Sang. He hasn't panned out, and I don't think he'll ever figure it out either. Although he's got all the skill to play in the NHL, he's just never going to figure it out. So, the best case scenario, this guy pans out to be an elite first line all-star right winger like David Pastrnak. He's got the skill to do that. Worst case scenario, he flames out like Josh Ho-Sang and just doesn't get it together. But he's 18 years old. He's got plenty of opportunity to mature here. Playing in the CHL or the AHL, it'll be interesting to see what Boston decides to do with him. I really have no read on the situation as to where they think he should go. You said he'd get some hard knocks and learn the physical game playing in the dub. It's hard to argue that he wouldn't get that playing at the AHL level as well. I'm curious to see where he goes. And if he does end up going in the AHL, I hope he just plays the whole season there. And even if he's tearing it up, that the Bruins kind of resist the temptation to recall him to the NHL and just kind of reinforce his me first mentality. We'll see. Your take is you'd like to see him in the CHL in junior?
Yeah, I kind of would. But I mean, there's a lot of rumors going around about Lysell and how he was approached for his role with Luleå in the SHL. He signed a 2-year deal back in January of 2021. So he was technically under contract, but Luleå management approached him and said that we'd like to basically split your games between the pro level and their J20 team. And he really did not like that. He just did not. I thought he was ready for the pro level all the way. So it's kind of hard for me to say that he would go to the WHL because of that fact that he doesn't want to play against players that are his age and so on, or a little bit of a closer age group. But maybe the AHL is his idea. To get that mixed group of ages and veterans and so on. You get a whole basket full of things, and when you get to that level, so
plus to get paid.
Yeah, exactly. But it remains to be seen what the Bruins management wants to do with him and what the player feels and so on. But either way, his movement over to North America is going to be important. Smaller size ranks, the game's coming at you a little faster and so on. So I believe that, whatever path that they choose, it's going to be the right one. But I still do want to do it, develop him properly. There's no need to rush this kid. So especially when you have contracts already taken at the NHL with Craig Smith, you got 3 more years with him and so on. So there's really not an available spot at this moment at the NHL level. So do it right.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting causes or side effects of last year's season with the whole COVID pandemic thing and the OHL not having a season was you had all these players who were right out of the draft, couldn't go back to the OHL. So they played in the American Hockey League, which they would never be allowed to do under the old transfer agreement. And for the most part, they all played really, really well. They acquitted themselves quite excellently at the American Hockey League level as 18-year-olds. So, if Lysell comes in and has a good development camp and then a good training camp, I wouldn't be surprised if Boston's first choice, if he can handle it from a competitive level, would be to put him in the AHL. Then he's like in their system, and if they have concerns about his attitude and his and whatnot, they can have firsthand account of that, right? And they can keep an eye on that, and they can squash that or try to if they see it. So anyways, Lysell debuts at number 1 on the list, and number 2 is a player who I don't even know if we were talking about him last year, and he has just rocketed up like a bullet up to number 2, and that's goaltender Jeremy Swayman. He had I don't even know if you can really consider him a prospect anymore. He looks like, he fits my criteria. He's under 25 years old. He's played less than 25 career NHL games, but he broke onto the scene in a big way last year, looking spectacular in his first pro season playing with Providence. And was it his first pro season?
Yeah. Just right out of University of Maine, came into a abbreviated 25 game schedule in the American Hockey League with the Providence Bruins, and that team only played 2 other teams in that division because of the pandemic and so on. That was Bridgeport and the Hartford Wolfpack. So
yeah,
but he did good. I thought he did really well and adjusted really well.
Not exactly a come out of nowhere kind of player though, right? Like he's got some pretty good pedigree on his resume there. He's a 4th round pick, which is, okay for a goalie. But he was won a bronze medal with USA at the World Junior in 2018. And he's a Hobey Baker finalist with Maine. So, he had a pretty spectacular record there. 8-10 record with Providence and a 189 goals against average. And then he outplayed Yaroslav Halak at the NHL level and made Daniel Vladar expendable. Like, those are pretty good accomplishments and special skills that you can put on your resume. That beats mine. I can use chopsticks. That's about all I got.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something right now, Peter. The U.S. World Championship comment that you made, one of the big reasons why he was on that roster as a 3rd goaltender was because of how much rubber he was seeing at Maine. And Maine traditionally in the past couple of years has not recruited very well because it's not an NCAA club that goes to the Frozen Four on the regular and so on, and really, gets players to like want to go to Maine all the time. So a lot of the game was on his shoulders, and he was seeing a lot of rubber, and he actually saw more shots than the 2 goalies ahead of him on that U.S. club. So there's something to be said. And like you said, the absolutely countless awards this kid was getting: goaltender of the week, player of the month, NCAA. And the way that Alfie Michaud, the goaltending coach in Maine, and former Maine alum Mike Dunham, former NHLer himself, the way they work with this kid was just amazing. I mean, Mike was up there all the time working with him. They were really breeding this kid to be something special. And we all, and for the people that don't able to get the AHL package and watch these games, Bruins fans really got to see what he could do at the NHL level, which obviously, catapulted his fandom right through the roof. Now we can get rid of every goaltender and have this guy start every game of the season. We're winning the cup this year. I mean, there was a lot of like high praise, but he's still another player that has only seen a limited amount of professional time in the AHL and NHL. And I still think that we need to step back and be patient with him. But also this is really frustrating a lot of Bruins fans, is the idea of Tuukka Rask possibly coming back mid-season after hip surgery, and with Swayman's availability in his second year of his entry-level contract, he is able to go down to Providence. So that could very well happen if Rask does come back and he's healthy enough to contribute.
Right. So they got Linus Ullmark signed up as a free agent, I think it was, at 4 years at $5 million. So they kind of have to play him, and he's going to be in Boston for, the next 4 years for sure. I think long term they really like Swayman as well. What's not to like? I guess that's a really big question mark with Tuukka Rask. I guess once he's healthy and if he declares himself fit to play and wants to come back, Boston's got to want that.
Yeah.
He's kind of put himself in a corner where he said it's Boston or nothing. And, I could see him picking up the phone in January and say, hey, I'm good to go. And Boston's like, nah, we're good, man.
Yeah. But it definitely is going to, I mean, he's not under contract. He's a UFA right now. Like you said, doesn't want to play anywhere else. But Don Sweeney and his staff members have got to think that if Allmark and Swayman are doing so good, I mean, you're leading the league and you're top of you probably could be a Jennings Trophy winner at the end of the season. It's so hard to bring back a goaltender like that from a hip surgery when you actually don't know how he's going to produce and how he's going to perform when playoffs get harder and so on. I don't think that I like Tuukka and everything. I'm a huge fan of the guy, but it's just, I think it's time to usher in a new group of goaltenders to try and see what we have here in the crease.
All right, so I'm going to follow that segue and we're going to move on in the conversation, and we're going to get to the third ranked player I had on my list. So Lysell debuts at 1, Swayman vaults up to 2nd, and he'll be graduating off this list probably, by Thanksgiving. He'll have outplayed his eligibility. So the guy that I think I had number 1 last year, I'd have to go back and check, but now he's fallen down to 3. Is that because he's been outplayed by Swayman and Lysell's skill level so high, or has his stock level dropped? And I'm talking about Jack Studnicka.
Ooh, good one. Yeah, Jack's an interesting one to talk about. The kid's such a hard worker. He really is. I mean, he did not go down to the American Hockey League and frown or anything like that. He went down there, worked hard. I think he's still a big player when it comes to these rankings. So having him 3rd is not a bad idea at all. But unfortunately, with the upcoming season and the contracts that the Bruins signed in free agency and so on, it's really going to make it hard for him to crack the NHL roster. He's got one more eligible year under his entry-level contract to go down to Providence, and that's actually where I have him as a first-line center in Providence. He's gained some weight. Everybody's been talking about it. Captain's practices started today, so there's a lot of talk about him being bigger. His skill set has improved. But these are captain's practices too. These are just casual skates and so on. But it remains to be seen that what happens to him in the NHL training camp that's coming up real soon. So, I mean, if he can win a roster spot either up the middle, which I kind of find it hard with the way that this center depth is, he can also find a spot on the right side, which he has been playing because so many people that I know, so many old folks that know prospects really well, they say that centers are easier to go to the wings than a wing going to a center.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, center is a much harder position. So when David Krejci announced that he was leaving the NHL, my first thought was that opens the door wide for Jack Studnicka. So I looked into that a little bit, thinking that was a bit of a no-brainer, that here's his opportunity. And, I kind of looked and reviewed how he did last season. And, quite frankly, it wasn't very good. He was a regular on the taxi squad, so his games played was a little bit limited. He played 20 games in the NHL in a variety of roles. At times he was in the top 6 or the bottom 6. He was on the wing. He played center. He only had 1 goal and 3 assists in 20 games. And in the AHL, he had 7 and 11 with no goals. So his production was stinko. The competition for that second line center between Studnicka is Nick Foligno, newly acquired. He can play wing or center. And Charlie Coyle, that's pretty much the way I see the competition for that center position. And Eric Holla was acquired. If he's their second line center, I think that's trouble. I think he's a great third line center. So there's a question mark as who gets to play second line with Taylor Hall and Craig Smith. That's a pretty juicy plum. So if you're looking at picking up Studnicka in a fantasy league, do you draft him for that role, or do you draft him for a bottom 6 winger with hope that you're getting a second line center?
Yeah, I would go with the bottom 6 winger and just kind of wing it on if he can get games, if he's going to outplay some of these new guys that are coming in, like Thomas Nosek and Eric Haller, which I don't believe that will happen. But and I don't see him playing in a 4th line role either. I think he's too good for that.
Well, remember in his draft +1 season, his first Bruins training camp, everyone was all the rave about how this guy almost made the team as an 18-year-old. And, now he's 21, 20.
Yeah.
And he's struggling.
So many people had him penciled into the NHL right out of development camp. It was crazy. Right after his 2016 second round pick, they wanted him in the NHL as soon as possible. But that was just, he's like I said, he's such a hard worker and he knows what's ahead of him. But I honestly think that Providence is probably going to be the better option for him until he can prove down there and somebody's really struggling up at the NHL level that he could win their spot. I just see him at the AHL this upcoming season.
Yeah, and that's a huge red flag for me. If I'm a fantasy owner of Jack Studnicka, he's 22 years old. He was on the cusp of making the NHL 4 years ago, and he still hasn't made it. And now the door is wide open. And you're a player, a writer and podcaster who's watching him a lot and has a finger on the pulse. And you're saying it's not happening this year. I'm thinking if it's not now, it's never.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Cap Friendly or anything like that, I mean, you can definitely see that there's some spaces that are coming up in the next season that might be his better path to the NHL full time next year. But obviously this will be his last entry level year. So he'll have to be resigned. And I also think that he's also a high trade chip too. And NHL success might come somewhere else if needed to move at the trade deadline. So there's so many optics of this player and so on, because he's got the skill set to play in the NHL. It's just, he hasn't completely earned a spot, nor has a spot been available for him.
Right, and I can forgive the latter, but not the former.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on from Jack. I think that's a pretty safe and predictable top 3. The guy I've got number 4 might raise an eyebrow though, and I'm pretty high on this kid, and that's 20-year-old defenseman Mason Lohri, who's going to the NCAA. He'll be a freshman at Ohio State. He's a big defenseman. He's 6'4", 205. So there's the Bruins drafting guys with size. But this guy's got a really good stride. He's a very fluid skater, and he's lighting the lamp. He played in the USHL, so you take these stats with the appropriate grains of salt, but 19 goals. He's a defenseman. He almost had 20 goals, 59 points in 48 games, plus he racked up 74 penalty minutes. We'll see how that translates to the NCAA. I might be getting a little bit overexcited about his counting stats, the tail of the tape. And then, I've seen I haven't actually watched him play, but I've seen a few highlights, and I'm like, man, kid can move for a pretty big kid. And then, I read some notes, a lot of them from your guys' side at Black and Gold, about how he was looking like the best player at the Bruins development camp. So, I mean, he's got a sharp developmental curve that's pointing straight up with his combination of size, skill, and skating ability, and his physicality, his offensive upside. Am I a little bit over anxious with this guy? Am I rating him too high, or is there cause for celebration with this second round pick from 2020?
Yeah, I don't think he's I think he's in a great spot on your list. This is a kid that just let's groom this kid right out to be really good, because when he played for the Green Bay Gamblers in the USHL last year, he had career years. He led all defensemen in scoring. He won some kind of award. I'm not sure exactly which one it was, but he plays in all types of situations. He's got such.
I think he won the "You're really freaking good" award.
Yeah, exactly. But you've seen so many players of his size that can move and with their agility and so on. When I watched him play, and I later on at night, I froze tape from an end-to-end rush. It was his shoulder fakes were incredible. I mean, for a big kid, he's got really silky smooth hands, but the way he comes into the zone and just weaves and bobs, I mean, and he drops a shoulder and it just fakes everybody out like he's going to the left and they go into the right, but he's going straight forward, But I really like the way that he's progressing, and I love the way that he played in the USHL, and then going into playing for Ohio State this upcoming season. I'm looking forward to watching that game. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be his stats are going to come down to earth a little bit with the new adjustment to a new league and so on. But I still think that he's going to be an impactful player in the. I think that's the Big Ten.
Yeah. I think he should hit the ground running in the NCAA. I don't think he's going to score 20 goals as a freshman in college as a defenseman. But to your point and mine, he's already 20 years old. He's got great size at 6'4", 205, so he's not going to be pushed around by playing against older players than he was in the USHL. And, he can keep up with the speed of the game. So I think a lot of it will depend on the role he's given by his coach as a freshman, if they want to give him prime minutes, 15, 20 minutes a night, power play, penalty kill, that kind of stuff, or if they're just kind of insulate him a little bit. I'm not sure what the depth is like at Ohio State University, but if he doesn't have a very good season, I would be very surprised.
Yeah. And I also wouldn't be shocked in a player like this that, he plays 2 seasons or even 3 in his junior year and then turns pro.
Yeah. I mean, he's already 20. So, if he plays a full tour of duty at the college level, he'll be 24 when he turns pro. That's, he's missing out on $1 million there in career earnings. So I don't think he's going to play more than probably 2 seasons if he's producing, and Boston, will want to bring him up into the pro level, maybe put him in the AHL for a season, and then we'll see from there.
Yep.
Okay, so number 5 is another center that has fallen down the rankings a little bit. I had him much higher last year this time. He is a 2019 first round pick, 30th overall, and that's University of Michigan big center John Beecher, 6'3", 209. He's 20 years old now. The Wolverines are going to be loaded for bear this year. They're going straight to the Frozen Four with their superstar roster. So he's not going to have a top 6 role. I think he's going to be their defensive, physical shutdown defenseman, because he's not going to get big minutes with Beniers, Kent Johnson, and Brendan Brisson playing in the middle or in the top 6 anyways. So I think his role in the NCAA this year will be very similar to what it'll be if and when he makes it to the NHL. I don't really see him as having, the ability to step into a top 6 role. I like his game. I like how he's got some skill. He's a good 2-way player. But I think he'll write his paycheck at the NHL as a big, strong, physical 2-way defenseman that you can play against the other team's top line. And not only can he shut down, star players, but he can also cash in some points too. He's not a total Bill Berg tool when you pass the puck to him. He can finish, he can skate. That's kind of the way I see John Beecher, which, putting him 5th overall on this list, I feel pretty good about. How do you feel about my assessment on John Beecher?
He's actually a forward. I kept hearing you saying a defenseman.
A defensive forward. Yeah, no, he's a center. Forward. Yeah. He's a center. Yeah.
But yeah, I the way this team's going to be loaded. I mean, this is probably going to be a championship team. Hopefully, this would be great for that club. And I do like the way that Mel Pearson has been using John, he, not only up the middle but also on the left side. So there could be he's a versatile forward that could be shifted around when needed. But I definitely can think that he's probably going to be a 3rd, 4th liner wherever he ends up. If he earns it, he earns it. But I still believe that he's a solid prospect for the Boston Bruins. Not I would actually reach to say, well, no, it's not a reach. I would actually say that he'd probably be a third line forward in his NHL projections, in my opinion, which is not a bad idea. Basically the same thing as Trent Frederick had coming out of the University of Wisconsin and so on. So I like Johnny's game. He does play a big role, heavy hitting. And he does make mistakes here and there, but I like the way you have him ranked here at 6.
All right, so that's the top 6. No, 5 actually. That's the top 5. At 6, I have winger Jakub Lauko. How do you say his last name? Lauko.
Yep.
Awesome. So I mean, last year he played in Providence, and he was okay, and then pandemic hit, so he started last season over back home in the Czech Republic. 10 points in 25 games, that's okay. It's not great. Then the AHL resumed, North America opened up and started playing games, so he came back and boom, 19 points in 23 games with Providence. Where'd that come from?
I know. It's good to see that he had a big year because of his previous 2 seasons, especially in the World Juniors when he was out there for a minute shift and busted his leg, broke it, and that was it. But that was a bad year. He had head injuries. He had other injuries with Providence. So it was just a really tough year. But this past season, an abbreviated year, he played so much better. His two-way game is starting to round out. And that's one of the things that I was really nervous about when he was playing with the Moncton not the Moncton Wildcats, but he was playing in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League with the Rouyn-Noranda Huskies. And when the kid had the puck, it was just more straight line, but his feet were moving faster than his hands. And that's something that I wanted to see him adjust more and so on. And learn that to play well with the puck and without the puck. And I think that the more that he's stewing down in the minor pros and learning this type of game, it's just a better for him. So for me, I could definitely see him making the NHL roster sometime in the next 2 seasons with some departures, but still a solid little prospect. And boy, did he drop the glove several times this year, sticking up for a teammate when you really didn't think that that's the type of guy that should be doing it. He just did not care, went over and just hammered some people. I was shocked. I'm watching on AHL TV and I'm like, that's Lauko. I'm like, who's not his role.
Who's wearing Lauko's jersey?
Yeah, right. That's Ian McKinnon's job. But no, it was good to see.
Yeah, it looks like he's got some decent size behind him. He's 6 foot 190, so he's not undersized, but he's not a tough guy. He's coming from the Czech, so it doesn't sound like that's his job for sure. He's a speedy winger. He's offensive first kind of guy, but I like what you're saying. He's developing the other elements of his game, and you need that to move up the ladder. But he's only got 45 career games. So, while he is a fast rising prospect all of a sudden with the Bruins, I'm seeing him playing a full season in the AHL coming up, getting a full 60 plus games there. And, if he's healthy, and then, maybe a couple cups of coffee with the Bruins when there's some injuries and whatnot, keep him motivated, as they say. Yep. You think 2 seasons, maybe?
I'm saying at least 2, yeah. Just by looking at the landscape on Cap Friendly right now, it's just you could definitely see it probably in a year or 2. But then again, who knows? I mean, these kids they could surprise anybody in these systems. So
yeah, if his play warrants a full-time NHL job, and he's got an entry-level contract, they'll make a space for him.
Oh yeah, especially in a flat cap world.
Right. Next on my list, we're going back to the blue line for a couple here, and I've got it 7th overall, a player that I really like. I've seen him play a little bit in the NCAA level on TV whenever I get a chance, and I like his game. He's a little bit undersized, 5'8", about 180, but he plays a sandpapery kind of game, and he's going to try and follow the same development path that Torrey Krug followed with the Bruins. Similar size, similar playing style. undrafted, college signed free agent. I'm talking about Ahcan. He made his debut in the pro level last year, 10 points in 19 games, and he made his NHL debut late in the season as well. Being an undrafted prospect, he played his full tour of duty at college, so he is 24 years old. So the window of opportunity for him to make his mark and break the NHL is going to be pretty short. He's going to have to make some hay this season. Do you see him playing his way onto the roster and even being 50% of what Torrey Krug was would be a great success?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jack. I really liked what I saw in him working with Brady, Lyle on the blue line, top pairing in Providence. He's so mobile, so mobile. He does remind you of that Torrey Krug type of player that could play the half wall, get down low, great passing skills, great vision. But I don't. He's the type of player that I hate saying career AHLer. I do not like saying that at all, because I do believe this kid might get it somewhere, but I'm not sure if it's going to be in Boston with the way the landscape's coming out, with Carlo being signed longer term. McAvoy's going to come up, with a truck that's going to be backed up to his door pretty soon. I mean, that number's starting at 7-3, so who knows? But there's a chance, but I honestly don't see it. And that's not a knock on the player at all. He's just a really good player, hard worker, and his teammates love him. And he's another one that is a pit bull. I mean, you said he's 5'8". So many people in Providence on Twitter, when they were watching these games, was like, I can't believe this kid's under 6 feet tall. He plays like a 6'3" defenseman.
Yeah, it's easy to cheer for him. I like rooting for the underdogs, and when you're 5'8", you're an underdog, and when you're undrafted, you're like super underdog. So yep. I really like the kid. I think he's got skills. First time I noticed him was at the USA World Junior Development Camp when they played it in Canada. They had an exhibition game in, I want to say it was Oshawa, that I went and caught him play there, and I'd never heard of him until then. And I watched him play, and I was like, who the heck is this kid trying to make this team? And I watched the game, like, okay, I can see that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out who this kid is, right? He's playing in college, so I watched some games. Like, he's not even drafted. What's he doing in this tournament? And I get it. He's a great hockey player. I don't know why he wasn't drafted. I guess because he's 5'8".
Exactly.
You don't scout with a measuring tape, is what Craig Button told me, and I agree with him. Speaking of scouting with measuring tapes, 8th on my list, Urho Vaakanainen. He's kind of the exact opposite. He's a behemoth. He's 6'1", 185. I guess that's not behemoth, but he's a physical defenseman. Doesn't really have a lot of offensive flair. So, I keep in mind, folks, listening to this for fantasy hockey purposes, I wrote this article for non-fantasy hockey purposes. If this were purely a fantasy ranking, he wouldn't make my list unless it was in a categories league where I was counting hits and blocks. Not to say that he's devoid of any offensive abilities, but if he makes the team, it's not going to be to run the power play. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, Urho's a real good player when he was drafted, and there was a lot of it's when he first started playing in the NHL, it was unfortunate that he got his bell rung. And I honestly think that was a downward spiral in his short career that he's still trying to climb out of. The second year after his head injury, he was playing in Providence. You saw him do the right things. He was blocking shots. He was doing some really positive things, but he was also, I'm paraphrasing, tedious about going into a corner or going into an area where he thought that he might get hurt again. It just seemed like he wasn't letting up, but almost like that he just didn't want to fully commit and more or less like stay alongside the net and so on and not go after the puck. That's just my opinion, by the way. But I still believe that he's a work in progress for this Boston Bruins organization, and having him at 8th is not a bad spot for him. But the time's like basically running out on him, and he also could be another trade chip like Studnicka. So Vaakanainen, this is his last year under an entry-level contract as a 22-year-old. So remains to be seen with him. I like the player. I like the way he can move and so on, but it's his full commitment, in my opinion, that's really just not all there.
You've hinted at trade bait players a couple times. Are you trying to put together a trade package for Jack Eichel here?
No. That's you're going to need a lot more than Jack Studnicka and Urho Vaakanainen to get anything like that done.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so I think Urho Vaakanainen is on the cusp of making the NHL. I think I'd be surprised if he played more games in the AHL than the NHL this season, but I could see him doing a little bit of both. How do you feel about him being ranked 8th on this list?
I like it. I mean, it's not terrible. But like you said, I mean, there's a definite possibility that he could beat out a player like Jakub or Connor Clifton for that rotationary defenseman that they carry a lot. But you know, let's see what happens in camp and how far he goes from there. But you know, he definitely could be involved in something in the future if they're trying to address that 2C.
It's going to be a big year for him. I don't think he'll be on my list next year one way or the other. He'll either make the Bruins and be a full-time roster player, or he won't, and then he won't be relevant prospect anymore. I feel like it's kind of a put up or shut up kind of season for him.
Right.
All right. Next guy on my list is hold on. I think I'm getting conflicting information here. I was going to say Brett Harrison, but I don't think it is.
He is a player.
He is a player.
Yeah.
but he is not 9th on my list. My bad. More preparation required. I went number 9. I went behemoth, Curtis Hall. 6'4", 216 pounds. He had a whale of a season with Yale the year before last, where he had an offensive output where his goal totals went from 5 to 17. Looking to follow that up last year, Ivy League didn't play, so he turned pro, and I think he got an injury right out of the gate. Limited
first game.
Yeah, so he only ended up playing 13 games for Providence, and he never really got it going. What's your predictions for Hall? No relation to Taylor Hall, Curtis Hall. What's your predictions for him this season in Providence? You think big things, going to lead the team in scoring and hits and penalty minutes, or is he going to be like more of a bottom 6 kind of guy?
I think he's going to be a bottom 6 kind of guy, and I have him in my projections as a third line center, centering Cameron Hughes on the left and Alex Olivier Voyer on the right. So I think that's a good spot for Curtis to really, you know, he really didn't get a full pro season in last year, and I think that with everything opening up, fans in the stands, American Hockey League teams are now traveling again. You know, you're going to get some more team camaraderie, more regular life is going to happen. Hopefully, let's hope for that. But I think with more of everything opening up and so on, I think you're going to see a better player. And look, I'd look for him to be on the rise. I actually have Oscar Steen as my second line center in my projections. If Hall absolutely crushes it, I could see Hall jumping Steen for that second line duties next to centering left wing Jakub Lauko, and potentially I have Fabian Lysell on the right. So we'll see what happens there. But I do like Curtis Hall, big center. He can throw his body around. He's skilled. He's got some really good patience with the puck, but there's a lot more to go. It's still a work in progress that you still love to see happening at that level.
Would he make your top 10?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He would definitely make my top 10.
Cool.
I would actually, I mean, these rankings aren't terrible, Peter. They're not terrible. They're not terrible. But once we get to 10 and past that, I might critique it a little bit with somebody that I have in mind, but I'll let you.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on to number 10 then, so we can figure out who I missed. So I took a bit of a swing on Curtis Hall. I think this time next year, he'll either be way up in the top 5 or not even in consideration. depending on how this season goes. If he plays in the bottom 6, like you're thinking, and he scores like, 5 goals and 20 points and has 30 penalty minutes and no real particular outstanding counting stats, doesn't move his way up the depth chart on that roster, and goes into his 22-year-old season, I'll be cooled off on my Curtis Hall fandom a little bit. Number 10, I'm going back to the blue line with Swedish defender Victor Berglund, a 7th round pick from 2017. I'm thinking maybe the Bruins got themselves a bit of a steal with this two-way defender. And again, for fantasy purposes, he's always been more of a defensive defenseman, has been the label on this guy. He's 6 foot 180. So he's not hulking defenseman, but he had a bit of an offensive outburst, scoring 10 goals and 22 points in 52 games last season I think he played Allsvenskan. And that earned him a promotion to the SHL. And he just kept on scoring there too, 21 points in 50 games. And I'm with Luella. I think he had like kind of limited ice time too. So those are pretty impressive counting stats for a 22-year-old playing in the SHL. It's not a very prolific offensive league. So he's probably coming over to North America this year would be my expectation. You can confirm or refute that. And then, I think he'll get an opportunity to strut his stuff in Providence for you this year would be my expectation. Would Victor Berglund be in your top 10? And am I on point with my assessment here?
No, you're absolutely on point. This is a pick that PJ Axelson was adamant about, the Bruins pick that late in the draft. He does have an unbelievable shot when he's able to use it. He does have speed. He does have good versatility. He reads the ice very well, even though it's a bigger sheet over there and so on. He was slated to come over in his first entry-level year last season, but obviously Europeans didn't travel because of the pandemic, so he stayed over in Europe as much as many Europeans did over there. But I'm really looking forward to having him in Providence next season. And to start him off, I would not be angry with him on a third pairing next to Big Nick Wolf, who is just signed an extension with the Boston Bruins. So I got big expectations for Berglund, and he's a player that could be on the rise as well. He's another one that you could put in that category of a Tory Crew type of player or potential of. So I really like this kid, and I can't wait to see him over here on the shorter sheet.
All right. Well, that's my top 10. I had 3 honorable mentions as well that I kind of had in and out of my top 10 at different points in my research. I moved them up, I moved them down. And, when the musical chair song ended, these guys didn't have a chair. That's Brett Harrison, 21 draftee from the OHL, didn't really play very much last year because the OHL didn't play. He's a big bodied center who, makes his money in front of the other team's net, causing havoc, getting garbage goals. Brady Lyle, a undrafted free agent coming out of the OHL with Owen Sound, I think it was. 6'3", 212. He had 14 points in 25 games with Providence in his rookie season last year. Last time I checked, that's very good. And then Trevor Kuntar, he had a really good development camp with the Bruins by all accounts that I could find. He's looking for a big sophomore season at Boston College coming up. He plays a gritty offensive game. And he's going to have a motor that, a little bit of Charlie Hustle to his game that I think fans and coaches will love. So that's my top 10 with 3 honorable mentions. You mentioned someone who I kind of neglected there, Oscar Steen. Okay, so it's time to pick apart my top 10. Be gentle, Mark.
All right, Peter. So if I was to do this top 10 myself, I would reconstruct 5, 6, and 7. And I would actually, and I hate doing this because I like Jack a lot, and I know you do too, and this is not why I'm doing it, but Jack Ahcan would not be in my top 10. He would actually be replaced with Brady Lyle. Brady's very high on this team. They really like him. The way the scouts came out in his overage year and got him as a free agent, and actually assigned as an AHL deal with Providence, and then worked so hard last year that he earned his way to an entry-level deal. So I have real high expectations for Lyle, and I'm not saying he's going to crack the roster this year, but it possibly could be within a year or two as a third pairing defenseman that could sneakily get right in there, because they are very high on this kid.
Right on. Is that the only kind of change you'd have made there?
Yeah, I mean, I like the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I mean, Beecher could have been flipped around a little bit with Lauko and so on, but yeah, Lyle in there too. Vaakanainen might be a little higher than I would expect. I would actually put Vaakanainen at 10 and put Berglund at 8. Curtis Hall still good there right at 9. But no, it's not a bad list. I mean, if it was there's only like one area that I could address, and that would be Lyle, and off of the honorable mentions and actually onto that list. And I think I gave you a little crap on Twitter about that too.
Maybe you and everybody else. That's what Twitter's there for, man. So I kept Oscar Steen off both my top 10 and my honorable mentions list. You mentioned him just a minute ago. Do you think he's at least honorable mention worthy, if not top 10?
Sure. I mean, Oscar's a really good kid. He's been really adjusting to the North American game the past 2 seasons in Providence, abbreviated or not. I mean, his projection's definitely a bottom 6 role, third, fourth liner, good penalty killer, and good forechecker. I mean, just that speed and his. Let me tell you, if you ever see this guy in shorts, it's intimidating. I mean, he's like almost he's a little taller than me, but he has stump for legs, man. They're huge. I mean,
like Yager.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's just, but he A-frames really well. He positions himself really well. And it just, I can't believe he gets that much speed and creates that much distance with those freaking legs. It's crazy.
Let's circle back a little bit and kind of talk a little bit more about Brady Lyle. We both kind of just glossed over him a little bit. In terms of fantasy, tell me about where you see his offensive upside in fantasy. And would he be more of a bangers cats league kind of guy? He's going to get you some hits and some penalty minutes and some blocks, or is he a big shooter? Do you think he's got power play opportunity in his future?
I think, honestly, Peter, I think he's going to be a mixed bag player that you're going to get whatever you can out of him if you give him the opportunities. You know, I mean, right now, for a fantasy aspect, I would think that he'd be a bottom pairing defenseman, but also that, you know, he's not afraid to jump in when available. He reads the ice so well, and he knows when to commit. And I love the way that him and Ahcan worked a give and go. It was really special to see that. It was like a set play and so on, where Lyle would move it up because Ahcan was just so fast. I mean, he's incredibly fast. And then the forward would get it, and here comes big old Lyle just trucking right in there and just blasting away a shot or getting it through the defenseman and close for a goal. It's just he's something special right there. And I got kudos to the scouts on getting him out of the OHL. I can't remember what team it is. I think it was the Battalion?
Sudbury, I think.
Yeah, it could be something like that. Yeah. But I like the player. I'm really excited to see him this year and another year of professional hockey down in Providence.
They don't have a lot of contract space coming up on the blue line. I'm just looking at Cap Friendly now, and you've got McAvoy and Zaboral as the only players with contracts expiring after this season, and that they're gonna want to re-sign both of those guys. And then everyone else is signed at least through the following season, with Brandon Carlo going on for the next, 100 years or whatever they signed him to. So, you got Connor Clifton as an unrestricted free agent after 2 seasons. And then you still got another year at, between 3 and 3.7 for Riley, Forbert, and Grzelcyk. So doesn't look like the Bruins are anticipating a lot of turnover, barring trades or something to that effect.
Yeah. I mean, Don Sweeney says it all the time. If you're the better player, you're going to play. So, it remains to be seen if he's going to live to those expectations. But if there's an opportunity for him to get up there, I'd really love to see it. Even if it's just a small stretch, a cup of coffee, just to give him, that taste and that feeling when you go down to Providence and you work that much harder,
Yeah, for sure. All right, Mark Allred from the Black and Gold podcast. Tell me a little bit about your Evil Bruins Empire network that you've got going on there, man. You got writers, you got podcasts, you got a little bit of everything. You got like a whole network going on.
Yeah, we do. We got the blackandgoldhockey.com website. We have 28 writers, which are just unbelievable colleagues. And we're looking forward to the upcoming season. We have a podcast network on the website. I think we have 11 programs right now, and we're looking for more. If you got, if you know anybody that loves talking Boston Bruins, send them my way, because we have room on the network, and we just love talking hockey. We love reporting on hockey. We're just hockey junkies.
Yeah, I could tell you guys are passionate about it. I see your stuff coming through on the Twitter feed all the time, and I try to share it as much as I can and promote your guys' work, because I like what you're doing. You're doing good stuff, and that's why I invited you onto the show, because you know what you're talking about. You watch the games, you know the players. All right, so let's put a bow on this. Boston Bruins prospects, the top 10 plus about 3 or 4 honorable mentions. They've got some good prospects, none that I would consider to be great, unless Fabian Lysell decides to be David Pastrnak and not Josh Hosang. Let's all hope for that.
Let's hope so.
All right, Mark Allred, really appreciate your time coming on the show. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening. If you enjoy the show, please feel free to give me a follow on Twitter at DPR_show. Give the show a 5-star review, all that fun stuff. You can follow me on Twitter as well at Farling, PHARLING, and keep reading Dobber Prospects and my NHL Trade Rumors and the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast. Thanks again, everyone. Keep your stick on the ice.